So the first show starring Superman in 10 years just debuted last night, and what an absolutely fantastic premiere it was. I was completely floored by it, and there's really is so much to talk about from it. But just before I do jump into talking about the episode, I want to say that I'm sorry if this channel kind of turns into a Superman and Lois channel for the next while, kind of similar to when Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 7 aired. There was just so much to talk about with that season and with that show that I really need to just make videos all the time on it. I think the same might happen with Superman and Lois, especially if the episodes continue to be as crazy as the premiere was. Although it does kind of depend on how well the videos do, because like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., for example, those videos did so much better than my usual videos do. And DC, and just not even just the Arrowverse, but just DC in general, the videos don't really do as well as certain Marvel videos do. So if the Superman and Lois videos aren't really doing that great, then I probably won't make them as much, but I still just kind of want somewhere to talk about them. But I really do think that there'll be enough things happening in this show each week to make me want to talk about it weekly. I also may possibly be live on Infotex's channel this Friday around 4 or 5 p.m. EST, I think. It's like 10 p.m.ish for me, but I think it's 4 or 5 EST time, and we'll be talking about the Superman and Lois pilot and probably some other stuff. So if you're not busy, then you should definitely tune in. But the opening 5 minutes might genuinely be one of the best openings to a pilot I have ever seen. It really reminds me of the opening to Batman v Superman with Bruce Wayne, where we're watching the origin of an iconic character, but it's done in a way that isn't boring, and it's just showing us things we already know. Like, it's flashing through the big moments without repeating or rehashing what we've already seen. Like, we've already seen Clark's pod land on Earth a lot of times, we've seen Jonathan Kent's death a lot of times, we've seen Lois and Clark, their first meeting, a lot of times. We've seen all of this so many ways and done in so many different ways, and I definitely wouldn't mind having been able to see it again in this. Deciding not to devote the pilot to all this stuff was really, really entertaining and already sets this show apart from all the other Superman shows in my opinion. And the music, like, holy shit, this music, I absolutely love it. It's already instantly memorable to me. It's already stuck in my head since I watched the episode. It's different from all the other Arrowverse shows, as this is the very first show that is actually like a mainline Arrowverse show. Like Stargirl and Black Lightning, I don't really count too much because they didn't start as Arrowverse shows. I guess Supergirl didn't really either. But like, for example, Stargirl and Black Lightning started very different. They don't have soundtracks done by Blake Neely. Superman and Lois, though, is very much tied to the Arrowverse. So this is kind of the first proper Arrowverse show to not have the soundtrack done by Blake Neely. It's very clear that they went for a different and Hans Zimmer-like sound, kind of like reminiscent of Man of Steel, which I think was a really great choice, honestly. I definitely will miss the usual Arrowverse sound, but even though the main themes on those shows are all very distinct and stand out, once you've heard all the soundtracks, you can always see a lot of similarities. So I think starting fresh with this one was a good route to go down. But the Superman theme that we hear in Supergirl and the crossovers is really good. But in my opinion, that theme always sounded a little bit too similar to Supergirl's. Like, a lot of the beats they use in that theme sounded very much online with Supergirl's theme, which makes sense considering they're the characters. But to me, it was always a theme that wouldn't have worked well if it was a main theme for another show, but it worked very well when he just was like one-off appearances every now and then. But it'll be really interesting to see what they do in future crossovers, because they use the old Superman theme in all the crossovers that Superman appears in. But if Blake Neely is doing the crossover soundtracks from now on, like he usually has always done, I wonder if they'll pretend there isn't a new theme and just go with the old Superman theme in the crossovers, or if they'll like mesh the two together, which I think will be really interesting and cool. There was actually a point near the start of the episode where Superman's first flying towards the nuclear plant, which that nuclear plant scene was great, but where he's flying towards the plant and there's like a beat going to it that really does sound like the beginning of the Supergirl version of the theme. So that might have been deliberate or might not have been, but it worked for me anyway. But of course, we need to talk about that absolutely beautiful costume that is a live-action interpretation of the Flesher early cartoons. And Clark is even lifting a car very, very similar to the one on the iconic Action Comics issue 1 cover. And I really like the new suit we're using for the character, but the absolute perfect suit, in my opinion, would be the color scheme of this original costume on that of the current one, because I feel that the current one is a little bit darker than I'd like it to be. It still looks great, it just is a little bit darker, especially in like the night scenes. It's kind of hard to make out certain patterns on it. But we actually didn't see the Supergirl version of this outfit at all. Like, I wonder if after Crisis they just retcon that he never wore that outfit now, because they even do a flashback to Clark's proposal to Lois, which was like 14 years ago, and in that he's wearing the current costume. So even though in the final episode of Crisis we see Kyle wearing the old suit, it looks like there's some timeline changes going on there, which, by the way, Elseworld actually might not have even happened anymore, considering that Clark proposed to Lois 14 years ago in the new timeline, whereas he proposed to her like 2 years ago in the pre-Crisis timeline. So there's a lot of weird timey-wimey stuff going on there. It'll be really cool if at some point we can get like a clear up of what things are canon now, what things aren't. Like, did Elseworld still happen? Did it just happen in a much different way? Like, was it basically just, I don't know, Dr. Destiny switched their bodies and then switched them back, like there was no Book of Destiny involved? It'll be really interesting to, like, at some point find out exactly what seasons count and what seasons don't, or something like that. But the one thing I was most worried about going into this show was Jordan and Jonathan, because since most of the show is going to be based around them and their dynamic with Clark and Lois, the whole thing really did live or die by them, I felt. And around halfway through the episode, I was still not entirely convinced I liked what the show was doing with them. But by the end, they really turned me around. And between revealing that Jordan is the one with powers and then being much more accepting of Clark as Superman now, I left the episode really, really enthusiastic about where we were heading with this story. Plus, I really dug the dynamic of both brothers being very protective of each other, even though they're the usual sibling messing. Like, you can tell they care about each other a lot, and the actors play that very, very well. Like, there's also just, they honestly just feel like brothers. Like, when the two of them go down to the cellar and find the spaceship, Jonathan is just screaming not to touch the ship, and then when it moves, he's like, what the hell was that? Did you see that? What the hell was that? And just the way the dialogue was written and how he acted it felt like these were two brothers with a lot of history together. And I really, really dug that. I thought it felt very realistic, because if they can get the dynamic between these brothers just right, then I really don't see how this show can fail. It really can just keep going up, up, and away. But the whole setting of Smallville was also great. It looks a lot more reminiscent of the Smallville we saw in Man of Steel than the one we saw in actual Smallville, but I still like it a lot. Like, speaking of Smallville the show, there were a lot of really cool Easter eggs and nods. Like, the big water tower had the Smallville logo from the show. There was a Smallville Crows flag on one of the walls in the bedrooms. That was a Smallville Schools football team, but like, I'm pretty sure that flag is just straight up a prop from the show, because we saw them all the time in that show. There was also references to Whitney Fordman, which he was an original character created for Smallville. He also got references in Man of Steel, actually. But then there was another shout out to Pete Ross, who has always been a part of the Superman mythos. Like, he's always just a character who's there at the beginning of Superman's story, and then not a lot after that. There was also a cool shout out to Steve Lombard in the opening, who's another long-standing member of Superman's mythos, and he's one of the main Daily Planet crew, just like Jimmy Olsen, Cat Grant, or Ron Troop. I would have really dug a Jimmy Olsen or Cat Grant reference, but we didn't get any luck there. But I thought the use of villains in this episode was great as well. Morgan Edge doesn't make an appearance at all, but he's a looming threat throughout the episode, and he's brought up a lot. Like, a lot of the problems in the episode, like the issues that the characters face, can be drawn back to Morgan Edge. And Morgan appeared early in season 3 of Supergirl, played by Adrian, I forget his second name, but he's the guy who plays General Talbot in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But he played him in early season 3 of Supergirl, so he's been recast. Actually, he's been played by someone else now who I also cannot remember off the top of my head. But it'll be interesting to see if, when he does make his eventual appearance, if there'll be any ties or references to anything from those episodes. And in terms of the Stranger or Captain Luthor, they did a really great job at building him up to his eventual reveal and creating a great mystery with him. I really, really liked towards the end the fight between him and Kyle, just flying around the planet. Like, the fact that they actually flew to a different country. I'm not sure which country they went to, but it was the same actually place where the leaked photos of Superman standing outside a shop, that was from that scene. But that was just great. I love seeing Superman doing things that are worldwide and not just located in Metropolis. I think that's always one of the coolest parts of the characters. And there was a bit where he like almost falls in front of a car, and then he just kind of gives a little nod to the guy who's sitting in the car. It was just classic Superman stuff to me. We don't have confirmation, but due to what he said, I think there's a pretty good chance that this Lexus planet was destroyed during Crisis, and he jumped to Earth Prime during the Earth's merging or something. And if that's the case, then this would pretty much make that the only reference or tie into any of the other shows in this episode, which is pretty unusual for the pilots. Like, so far, the core Arrowverse shows, other than Supergirl because it wasn't an Arrowverse show at the time, almost always have big tie-ins or references to the other shows that came before. Like, I would have really dug a reference to Kara or Supergirl or even like Jimmy or Kat, but not even one I wonder how Kara is or something was a tiny bit disappointing to me. Like at one point Lana says that Martha was a real life superwoman. Now this is probably a reference to the fact that at one point Lana had powers and did actually go by the name Superwoman, but in my opinion this would have been a great and perfect opportunity to throw in one quick shout out to Kara and her show, because just not mentioning them at all, it feels like, just in general, I think this episode was meant to be as welcoming to newcomers as possible and as clean of a slate as possible. Like, I think the higher ups said the references and crossovers can come down the line all they want, but there's going to be so many eyes on this pilot that we don't want to alienate or turn them away by throwing in like a John Jones reference or Cara Danvers or anything like that. But it'll be really cool to see how they handle the John Diggle crossover later, because this show really does already feel just so high above everything else quality wise at the moment that seeing John step onto a movie quality show like this will be cool. Which the VFX, everything looked absolutely amazing in this. The cinematography was great. There were some really, really, really good shots that was like genuinely in awe over. This wasn't just good CW cinematography. This is just good TV or movie cinematography in general. It just looked great. But I wasn't really used to this version of Lana, but I thought she was written pretty well. There wasn't really any problems with her. Her husband Kyle was a huge dick, but I liked the bit that at the end where he gave the nod to Clark when he was the firefighter, and I hope that those two can get along and not have unnecessary drama over Clark's past with Lana. I also really like their daughter Sarah, and while it does seem like they're building a future romance with Jordan, I think it would be a really fun story if they just kept them as friends who understood each other. I wasn't ready for the absolute gut punch that was Martha's death. And then with Sam Lane, I thought he had an interesting interpretation as well that I wasn't exactly used to. There was a lot there that was similar to what I've seen before, but in general, there was a lot of new stuff there as well. I like how he isn't just throwing insult after insult at Clark like most versions of that character do. He understands Superman and he can work with Superman even if he does disagree or have certain problems at times. But yeah, overall I was just very, very happy with how the episode and the premiere turned out. I'm still having trouble deciding if my favourite pilot was this or Arrow, so maybe I'll just take the easy way and say both are my favourites. But how did you feel about the pilot or the premiere? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Do you think it's a great start? Do you think it's a bad start? And please remember to like, share, subscribe and all of that, and I hope you have an amazing day.